Bueno, buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Hoy tenemos la oportunidad. La oportunidad de abordar la cuestión, los desafíos para la seguridad en el Sahel y la trampa de la intervención en Mali. Los temas, de relaciones internacionales y específicamente los temas de seguridad internacional son temas realmente muy importantes y muy queridos, por así decirlo, para esta Casa Árabe. Por tanto, aunque parece que se sale de nuestro propio perímetro, por así decirlo, conceptual, lo cierto es que la relación entre la seguridad del Sahel, la seguridad del mundo árabe y la seguridad de Europa, la relación es muy intensa. Por tanto, yo entiendo que esta es una magnífica oportunidad de abordar este tema. Es un tema relevante, es un tema importante y, por tanto, agradezco también la presencia de todos ustedes. En la mesa se encuentra conmigo Barah, Mikail, investigador senior de Oriente, Medio y Norte de África en FRIDE, y él tendrá la oportunidad de presentar tanto al ponente, Anouar Boukhars, como a Jesús Nuñez, que posteriormente hará el comentario o hará un contrapunto precisamente a la introducción de Anouar Boukhars. Así que paso la palabra a Barah Mikail. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Eduardo. Buenas tardes. Voy a hablar en inglés. So first of all, thank you very much once again, because as you know, it's not the first time that FRIDE and Casa Árabe organize something around the evolutions of the region. Basically, we've had the opportunity, among other opportunities, to have Martes al-Fajiri, I think it was about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, about Egypt and its evolutions. And so it's a pleasure today, indeed, to focus on one of these other aspects that are important, if not to say determinant, for the evolution of the region, to focus on a country that isn't part of the Arab world, but that at the same time has its impact, has its importance for a part of the evolutions of the Arab world, if not to say for the evolutions of the whole Arab world, at least on the middle or the long run. And so to discuss with us this issue, we have the pleasure today to have with us two leading specialists, observers, and experts of these issues. So at my left, the first person is Anouar Boukhars. Anouar Boukhars is a researcher at Carnegie Endowment International. You're part of the program, of the Middle East program at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. You're also assistant professor of international relations at McDaniel College, which is in Maryland in the United States. And you also authored some books. I know that you have one that is in preparation. Maybe you'll tell us about it afterwards. But among the books that you've published, there is Politics in Morocco, Executive Monarchy and Enlightened Authoritarianism, that was published at Routledge in 2010. As well as, maybe that's the book you're working on, which is written by you and Fred Wehery, or directed, I would say, by you and Fred Wehery. And the title is Perilous Desert, Sources of Saharan Insecurity. And I must add to that we have also the pleasure at FRIDE to have you as an associate fellow for a couple of months. So thank you very much for being here. And also at your left, Mr. Jesús Nuñez. So welcome, thank you for being here. So Jesús Nuñez is the co-director of the Institute for Studies on Conflicts and Humanitarian Action. I'm translating from Spanish to English. You are economist, you're also a retired military. You're specialized over the themes of security, peace construction or peace building, and prevention of conflicts, focusing especially on the Arab and Muslim world. You're the speak person for the Comité Español de la UNRWA, UNRWA, which is the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, since it was created basically in 2005. And you're also a member of the very well-known International Institute for Strategic Studies based in London since 1993. And I should add that you're also a consultant or an advisor for the UNDP, and you're also focusing there on peace building and prevention of violent conflicts. So thank you to both of you for being here. And maybe we start with you, Anouar Boukhars. So you have, let's say, around 20 minutes, between 20 and 30 minutes. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm going to talk about Mali. As you know, the French army has had important successes in Mali. Radical Islamist militants are on the run. The major population centers in the north are liberated, and there is broad Malian support for sustaining the military offensive that was launched on January 11, 2013. So this great military enterprise, however, does not mean that the armed militants are at the end of their tether, means they're defeated. The Malian army is still in shambles, and the African forces deployed to securitize the north are not yet up to the task. Armed radical Islamists still have significant ability to be a major and bloody nuisance for stability operations, reconstruction, and peace building. So in the north of Mali, fear and insecurity aroused to the highest pitch with every suicide bombing or hit-and-run attack. Intercommunal tensions and mistrust still prevail, and they are compounded by the alleged excesses and the abuses of the Malian army. Tensions in the Tuareg stronghold Kidal are still high, despite the recent accord between Bamako and the Secular National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, MNLA. The situation in Bamako in the south is slightly better. The interim civilian authorities have been empowered by the French intervention, but the coup leaders are still influential. Public opinion in the south is also increasingly hardening against compromise with the Tuareg rebels. So the temptation of opportunistic political actors in the south to stoke nationalism and stir the flames of ethnic animosity is strong. The electoral calendar set by the interim authorities is ambitious, but unless the many logistical hurdles are overcome, next month presidential contest might exacerbate tensions and end up creating more unrest. So there is a risk that a huge number of displaced people and refugees will not be able to participate in the vote, and that's a major problem. So it's therefore critical that the international community and the main regional stakeholders, Algeria and others, to harmonize their views and to adopt a common position on the necessity for a political solution to the conflict in Mali. Malians will have to come up with their own route to participatory reconciliation and democracy. But international actors like the EU and the United States can support the political process to sustain its momentum. Mali's neighbors, Algeria, Niger, Mauritania, and Burkina Faso and others, they must also align their efforts in fighting transnational terrorist groups and stemming the trafficking of arms, drugs, and other illicit products. So today I'll try to assess the security and the political challenges that complicate the process of putting Mali back together. In so doing, I'll examine the complex local and regional dynamics that can make or break international efforts to win the peace. So what we have today is uncertainty amid troops drawdown. The French, as you know, are anxious to bring major combats to an end in order to pass the baton to a UN peacekeeping mission of about 11,200 troops and about 1,500 police. The UN mission is expected to give a robust mandate under Chapter 7 to contain, for this force, to contain armed groups, securitize the urban centers, protect civilians, and oversee the political process. This force will be supported by a parallel permanent force, which is French. About 1,000 French troops would be stationed in Mali indefinitely. And these folks, they would focus on counterterrorism. But the French troop drawdown is complicated by several factors, important among which is a decrepit and undisciplined Malian army, the unreadiness of the African force to do the heavy lifting of keeping the peace, and uncertain prospects of intercommunal reconciliation. So, to understand the conflict in Mali, one has to look below the surface of the violent extremist groups that operated and still do in northern Mali, and there are three of them, as you know: Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb, Mujah, and Sardin. The conflict in Mali, true, it was triggered by the civil war in Libya, but the conflict has its roots in tensions between the northern elites in Mali, tensions that have been growing over the last few years. There are divisions, competitions, and mistrust between and among the different communities in the north. Even within the Tuareg themselves, tribes, divisions, and antagonism run deep, even within the Tuareg. For example, the aristocratic Ifugas and their allies are pitted against the Imrad vassals and their Arab associates. So before it backfired on him, ATT, as he was called, Amadou Toumani Touré, he was the president of Mali from 2002 to 2012, and he was deposed in a coup in March 2012. He exploited these divisions between and within communities in the north. He opportunistically dispensed favors, and he played groups and tribes against one another. So his strategy of controlling the north, his strategy of preventing the thinly populated and peripheral northern zones of Kidal, Gao, and Timbuktu from slipping back into armed insurgency was based on outsourcing state functions to Tuareg clans of lower status, to opportunistic local elites, and to armed Arab factions and militias. So as a result of privileging one faction against the other, one clan against the other, the Tuareg tribes of aristocratic descent, as one scholar put it, they saw their hitherto dominant position in Kidal eroded. Right? So this unsettling of the status quo, the social status quo, and the creation of new vested interests that were buttressed by criminal and tactical alliances is what contributed in the first place to the conflict in Mali, not the Libyan war. The Libyan war was only the trigger that caused the eruption of northern Mali. So the radical Islamists, as one scholar put it, are the contingent creatures of this governance system. And the central authorities in Bamako are not the only ones to blame. I mean, the Tuareg themselves contributed to this problem. Between 2006 and 2009, for example, there is this young Tuareg officer called Bahanga, and he resisted any settlement whatsoever with the central authorities. He refused any agreement with the central authorities. So to deal with him and to mitigate this troublemaker and his armed militia, the president, he recruited among northern communities, and he built a clientele that was all too happy to use the sponsorship of the state to promote its interests, including with participating in drug trafficking. So drug money that was introduced into Mali, 2006, 2007, 2008, it further upset the traditional socio-political patterns and the balance of power between and among the communities in northern Mali. It also fueled local rivalries and the struggle for who could control the drug trade. Such social upheaval is what contributed to the eruption of the 2012 rebellion. And this is what still complicates the search for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. So that's the major problem number one. Second major challenge is who can secure the North now. The African-led international support mission in Mali, AFISMA, is still a weak force to take over the fight against violent extremist groups and to handle security in the liberated areas in the north. To be sure, the deployment of AFISMA to northern Mali was swift and it was widely applauded by the international community. But with the exception of the Chadians, right, the African battalions, they arrived in the theater of conflict ill-equipped and unready for combat. They lack funding, they lack the transportation capability to project power, they lack reconnaissance and combat aircraft to survey targets in a huge theater of operations. The northern Mali constitutes 2/3 of Mali, and it's only populated by 10% of the population. The Malian army is also incapable of securing the territories and military gains won by the French and the Chadians as well. It is corrupt, it is demoralized, it is disorganized, and it is plagued by factionalism. It also possesses mostly antiquated military equipment and vehicles that don't function. So the challenge of reversing institutional deterioration, of fostering civilian oversight over the army, of creating a cohesive, disciplined, and well-equipped force is a daunting task that's going to take years to accomplish if it does. The EU is doing its job. The EU training mission in Mali, UTIM, is planning to rectify these ills by training about 4 battalions of 650 soldiers over a period of 15 months. The focus of the Europeans, mostly French, the trainers, will be on basic firearm training skills, such as shooting practice. The trainers will also provide theoretical modules this time on how to comply with humanitarian law so that they don't abuse civilians in northern Mali. But the challenge that the EU is being faced with, and the Americans as well, is how to avoid the flaws that dodged previous training missions. We all know that the United States and the French, but mainly the United States, spent millions of dollars training Malian soldiers only to see hundreds of them, including top commanders, flee or defect to the rebel side after spending millions of dollars on training them. But even if the EU and the Americans and others, they managed to reconstruct the Malian army, this new army would not be able to tackle by itself problems that are by their very nature transnational, and problems that are propped up and supported by powerful political, military, and economic networks. It is common knowledge today, we know now, that top officials, and in fact we knew for years now, the top officials in Mali's government and military, they colluded with organized crime. That was common knowledge. Drug trafficking business is still a problem, not just in Mali, in Mauritania, in Niger, Burkina Faso, and elsewhere. In both Mauritania and Niger, the groups that control the drug trafficking are influential and they are known locally. The groups that control the drug trafficking are known locally. There are networks of drivers and handlers that enjoy the protection of civilian and military authorities in Mauritania, in Niger, and also in Algeria. So, despite knowing these facts, the international stakeholders, including the EU, were all too eager to dispense economic and military aid, while ignoring the state's unwillingness or inability to crack down on drug activity. In fact, in Mali, the dispensing of foreign aid coincided with a dramatic increase in organized criminal activity. So it's therefore crucial for the international community, for the EU, in coordination with the Americans, to assess, before you dispense aid and money, to assess state willingness and capacity. The control of criminal activity requires more than just capable national security institutions. It requires more than capable armies, and gendarmes, and police. The willingness of state actors to thwart the criminal marketplace and the financial flows of the proceeds of trafficking is critically important. Without such resolve of the state, externally led efforts to empower the executive branch, to prop up its coercive apparatus, the military again, the police and the judiciary, is counterproductive. It won't work. Why? Because it didn't work before. A state that lacks capable institutional capacities but has leaders that are determined to fight terrorism and organized crime is the most suitable candidate for technical capacity building. That's where you should invest your money. So even if Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb and its allies are defeated in Mali, even if, and they won't, even if they are defeated, the main security threats will persist as long as governments lack the will to thwart criminal activity. Opportunities, unfortunately, for regional terrorist recruitment and arms supply are manifold in the region today. Right? The refugee camps in neighboring countries are especially of utmost concern. We have heard the UN Secretary General recently warn about the vulnerability of the Sahrawis and the Polisario-controlled refugee camps in northwest Algeria to radicalization and terrorist infiltration. This is the UN Secretary General words. Quote, it was a quote, not my words. So it's the first time that a senior UN official, first time that a UN official acknowledged what many experts have been describing for years as a ticking time bomb in the camps. The same fears applies to other refugee camps in Mauritania and Niger, where displaced Malians live in, quote, appalling, end of quote, conditions. Organized criminals and extremist groups will continue to exploit the fragility of state, frozen conflicts such as the Western Sahara, and the lack of regional security cooperation. The international community can help mitigate these external pressures by promoting regional cooperation, in sharing intelligence, in monitoring financial flows from drug trafficking, and in conducting joint operations. We haven't seen that yet in the region. Unfortunately, fragmented politics and fragile security in countries like Libya and also Tunisia, the opacity of the Algerian regime, the persistent suspicion and mistrust between Morocco and Algeria over the Western Sahara dispute will make current efforts to bring peace and stability to the region extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. There's another problem in Mali, besides the transnational aspect of it, is internal radicalization. Right? In Mali, imported extremist religious ideas that justifies the recourse to armed struggle have penetrated society, both north and south. And they contributed to the radicalization of religious discourse, a fact that fueled this contemporary wave of extremism that we're seeing both north and south. So the problem of homegrown radicalization exists, and it's compounded, is made worse, by its interconnectedness with transnational factors like illicit trafficking and regional terrorist networks. So it's critical for the EU, for the US, for others, for Malians, Nigerians, and others, to understand the motivational factors that lead to radicalization, as well as the reason that allowed extremist movements like Mujah, like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and also in Sardine, to successfully embed themselves into northern Mali and to recruit quite easily. Why did that happen in the last 6 years and not before? The leadership of the main terrorist groups we know are Algerian and also Mauritanian, especially Mujah. But their appeal to Malians and to West Africans needs a careful examination now. It's not only the Algerians and the Moroccans, the Mauritanians, but also the Malians and the Nigerians and elsewhere. So what prompted an important number of young Malian Fulani or Poles and Songhai in Gao to join the movement for Tawheed and Jihad in West Africa? This movement is a splinter of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic group that was born, as you know, in 2011, and it came to our attention after they abducted, among them Spaniards, from the refugee camps in the Polisario controlled refugee camps in southwest Algeria. So some of these guys that join, and guys for now, that join these terrorist groups, they did it for financial and local reasons, right? Lack of access to education, widespread feelings of unfairness, humiliation, etc. Others joined to seek worth and to seek an outlet to dramatically express their frustration. The same applies to those who actively sought out the radical Tuareg group of Ansar Din, right? Ansar Din means the supporters of religion. Some of the Tuaregs who joined Ansar Din, as one scholar put it, out of the conviction that only their Salafi ideology can unify the various Tuareg clans. Only Salafism can bring the Tuareg clans together. Only this interpretation of religion can bring the different ethnic groups together, right? Religion transcends ethnicity. That's why some joined Ansar Din. Ayad al-Ghali proposed, quote, an alternative. Ayad al-Ghali is the leader of Ansar Din, right? Ayad al-Ghali proposed, quote, an alternative to both the Malian state, which was riddled with corruption and nepotism, and to the political ideal of Tuareg independence, which has so far been unable to overcome the divisive clan structures within the Tuaregs themselves. The Tuaregs are divided, right? Can't speak with one voice. That's why the MNLA cannot speak for the Tuareg. So the crisis in Mali and the damage that armed Islamist groups have inflicted on the population represents an opportunity today for the Malian political and community leaders to marginalize violent extremists and to discredit their narratives and ideology. They overreached in Mali by trying to impose a radical form, their own view of Sharia, their own view. There are many different Sharias, interpretations, not one. But they tried to oppose their own sick, extremist interpretation of Sharia on the people. And they overreached, as if you follow Drugel's, the emir of Al-Qaeda, in his letters that were uncovered by the Associated Press, right? In which he urged his followers not to impose abruptly radical form of Sharia on the people quickly, especially in inhospitable environments. It's come gradually, but they didn't listen, luckily, to him. So, but the penchant for the use of repressive measures to combat extremists would be unsuccessful if you just rely on the use of force, imprisonment, unless the sources of disillusionment and frustration are addressed. So the roots of instability and conflict in Mali are complex and they run deep. But to sum up, it's unfair to blame only Bamako only the South for the problems in the North. It's unfair to do that. Authorities in the capital, in Bamako, did not pursue a deliberate discriminatory policy against the Tuareg of the North. As one scholar stated, over the last 5 decades, Tuareg militants have claimed for more autonomy and more development for the region, but they failed to build consensus on what they want. Several economic projects were directed to the North. The problem is that their impacts were limited. Impact of foreign aid, too, was limited, thanks in part to mismanagement of funds and to poor accountability. But it's important, this is critical. It's important to note that corrosive corruption was not only limited to the center. Powerful local elites, including the Tuareg themselves, Tuareg that were not appointed by Bamako, were accomplices, and at times they were the primary agents of mishandling or embezzling allocated funds to the regions. So decentralization was designed as a means of conflict management and good governance, right? Especially in the 1990s, the Algiers Accords. Decentralization was seen as a way of conflict management. The problem is that decentralization ended up breeding higher levels of corruption and rent-seeking. So it's not an exaggeration to state that a number of elected Tuareg and army men contributed to the criminalization, delegitimization, and fall of the state. As an ICG report stated recently, the situation in Mali cannot be described today as a conflict between, on the one hand, a southern, black, centralist state where corruption is rampant, a state that oppresses the Tuaregs and Arabs, that colludes with traffickers, that helped Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb establish itself in the north, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the MNLA and the Tuareg that represent, the MNLA that represents the Tuareg and is seen as the standard bearer of legitimate demands, and that is not involved in corruption, not involved in trafficking, and not involved in the establishment of armed jihadi groups. That's a caricature right there. Both are to blame. Central state and folks in the north. So the challenge today is how do you redress this? How do you reduce political corruption? How do you rectify the imperfections in infrastructure delivery, in the provision of public goods? We all know that in the north, there is a lack of local competencies, right? And this will be a major impediment to securing low-cost investment in vast areas. The problem in the north is that it is vast and it's sparsely populated and it's inhabited by nomads that move. So how do you invest? Nevertheless, the international donors can do a lot. They can support community development programs that invest in basic social services like roads, clinics, and so on, and to help improve the performance of livestock production and boost cattle exports. And I guess I'll just stop right here and then I'll pass it to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anouar, for respecting the time and also for coming with these very interesting insights, so from which we can understand a lot of things. So I won't get back to all what you said, but I would say that anyway, maybe there is a shared responsibility that we can understand in the Malian situation, that as you said, Libya was only a trigger, but Libya wasn't. I mean, there was a situation that preceded also what was happening, what happened therefore afterwards in Mali. And thank you also for insisting on the fact that I think that what we can see beyond that is that even though we have a debate on governance and the way we can deal with things, but I think that there are internal logics also that are very complicated and they should maybe really be analyzed one by one before eventually getting to a solution. So I know I give the floor is to Jesús Nuñez.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Es un placer participar en un acto como este y en una casa como esta. Por lo tanto, encantado de estar aquí para aportar algunos comentarios a partir de lo que ya está dicho. Luego, básicamente, más que pretender plantear algo con coherencia desde el principio hasta el final, lo que pretendo es únicamente apuntar algunos asuntos al hilo de lo que ya se ha comentado y, en algunos casos, ampliando el campo de visión o, en otros casos, quizá estrechándolo más. Porque podemos entender que Malí es un ejemplo más de muchos otros que podríamos repetir prácticamente las mismas palabras en la región saheliana, a partir del momento en el que Sahel aparece en el mapa, aparece en la agenda internacional, más concretamente en la agenda occidental. Si lo cuento en clave personal, me vale esa mínima anécdota para situarme. Hace unos años, preparando un libro sobre terrorismo en el Sahel, la editorial no estaba muy convencida de poner el título de Sahel en el libro, en el título. En esos días hablo con mi hermano, me pregunta qué estoy haciendo, y le digo, estoy escribiendo un libro sobre Sahel. ¿Sobre qué? Y digo, sí, pues convendría cambiar el título porque lo de Sahel nadie sabe de qué va. Y efectivamente al final no se tituló de esa manera. Sahel entra en la agenda internacional, como digo, en el marco de la guerra contra el terror. A partir del 11 de septiembre del 2001 y de esa nefasta guerra contra el terror que se pone en marcha, liderada por la administración estadounidense de George Bush, hijo, es cuando muchos nos enteramos de que existe esa región. Un concepto que apenas define una cuestión estrictamente geográfica, no hay nada ahí, una característica común que le dé una cierta unidad a ese conjunto diverso de países que nos llevan desde el Atlántico Sur hasta el Índico por el otro lado, atravesando, por lo tanto, el continente africano y dando nombre a eso, al Sahel, al borde, el borde que es lo que define ese conjunto de países. Por lo tanto, entran en nuestra agenda en clave ya directamente de amenaza, nunca de oportunidad, nunca de otro modo, sino directamente como allí se está generando un caldo de cultivo que amenaza nuestros intereses, nuestros, los occidentales. Si no los amenazan no hay ningún problema, da igual si se llevan matando muchos años, porque nunca nos ha interesado mucho en la medida en la que no hubiera algún interés vital en juego o en la medida en la que no tuviesen capacidad para exportar la violencia hacia otras latitudes. Y así encontramos el primer escenario, Somalia, por irme lejos en la región, pero a un extremo del Sahel, y luego Mauritania, y en el medio vamos incluyendo Malí, Níger, Chad y tantos otros. Si establecemos ya ese punto de partida de análisis de Malí en clave de amenaza, probablemente corremos el riesgo de olvidarnos de muchas otras cosas. Para quienes trabajamos en el ámbito humanitario, además de en el ámbito de la seguridad, Malí es un clásico escenario de hambrunas. Hambrunas, causa estructural que provoca muertes año tras año, sin reacción ninguna por parte de la comunidad internacional y de los donantes, aunque en este último año parece que la reacción ha sido un poquito más positiva, porque ya Malí estaba en la agenda. Luego, desde ese punto de vista, recordemos siempre que cuando hablamos de países sahelianos, estamos hablando de, por mencionar mínimamente algún apunte más que nos lleve un poquito más lejos de Al-Qaeda para el Magreb Islámico, de Muyá o de Ansar Diné, recordemos que es un escenario de hambrunas recurrentes, recordemos que es un territorio que en el marco de una división internacional del trabajo tiene una tarea muy clara, que es explotación de recursos naturales en beneficio de otros países. Malí es fundamentalmente oro y algo de agricultura, pero tenemos al lado Níger con las minas de uranio y podemos seguir el listado para atender a otros países. Una división internacional del trabajo en la que obviamente tienen un papel subordinado a un diseño generado fundamentalmente ya en tiempos de la colonización y después, en buena medida, mantenido hasta hoy. Estamos hablando, en el caso de Malí, de una estabilidad estructural, por definición, que parece que no nos ha preocupado hasta ahora. Malí tiene 7.000 kilómetros de fronteras con sus vecinos y sus Fuerzas Armadas tienen 7.200 soldados, a kilómetro por soldado o a soldado por kilómetro. Estamos hablando, por lo tanto, de un país que no tiene capacidad ninguna para garantizar la estabilidad ni la seguridad del Estado y de los malienses. Y por lo tanto eso es bien sabido, eso no ocurre de repente, pero tampoco nos preocupaba mientras no afectara a nuestros intereses. Y desde ese punto de vista también recordemos que cuando empezamos a analizar el problema es en enero del año pasado. Enero del año pasado es cuarta revuelta tuareg. Si hay una cuarta revuelta es porque la tercera y la segunda y la primera no se atendieron. Y por lo tanto esos problemas se reiteran nuevamente y nos vuelven a sorprender en cierto modo de una discriminación objetiva que existe en clave, obviamente como ya ha sido señalado, en la que se mezclan muchas variables, pero en cualquier caso un elemento más estructural que no ha sido atendido suficientemente, al cual se añade, como ya se ha dicho, un golpe de Estado en marzo de ese año y al cual se añade la manipulación, la instrumentalización por parte de unos grupos terroristas de unas reclamaciones objetivas de esa comunidad tuareg que es mayoritaria en esas 2/3 partes de Malí al norte del río Níger. Por otro lado, quizá a veces se confunde el hecho de que tanto Al-Qaeda para el Magreb Islámico como Muyao, como Ansar Dine y otros grupos que podemos citar, parecería que son la causa del problema. No, son la consecuencia del problema. Si no hubiera un caldo de cultivo en el cual pudiese florecer esa manipulación, esa forma de trabajar por parte de estos grupos para intentar de crear santuarios y de imponerse a poblaciones locales que no entienden y no aceptan, puesto que su Islam es tolerante, ese tipo de enfoques, evidentemente nos encontraríamos con que no habría ningún sustrato que permitiera a esos grupos florecer, como ya lo han hecho en estos últimos tiempos de forma cada vez más clara. Es consecuencia, por lo tanto, no causa el terrorismo yihadista que hoy asola buena parte de estos países. Cuando pensamos en retos, por lo tanto, ocurrido lo que ha ocurrido en Malí y en otros países en diferentes grados de desarrollo, vamos viendo que ocurren procesos similares, los retos, una vez más, tienen que ver no tanto con atender, con poner en marcha una operación militar como la que Francia ha liderado, operación militar que desde mi punto de vista cabría calificar, y lo he hecho ya en varias ocasiones al referirme a este tema, como tardía, insuficiente, pero en cualquier caso necesaria. Lo digo, puesto que estoy haciendo un comentario, va más asociado al telegrama, lo digo en términos telegráficos. Menos mal que Francia ha intervenido, porque si no, evidentemente, la situación, llegados a ese punto, habría sido peor. Pero que nadie piense por ningún lado, y ya se ha reflejado así, que esa operación Serval va a resolver los problemas estructurales que van mucho más allá, por lo tanto, de los instrumentos puramente militares. Es un error en el que ya hemos caído tantas veces Occidente, me vale con mirar a Afganistán, a Irak y a tantos otros lugares, que eso de que el hombre es el animal que tropieza 2 veces en la misma piedra, se me queda pequeño. 2 veces no, 2000 o 2 millones de veces, y seguimos tropezando en la misma piedra. Soluciones militares o instrumentos militares para problemas que no son de naturaleza militar y que, por lo tanto, no funcionan. Es decir, ahora mismo la Unión Europea, desde el año 2008, cuando España y Francia plantean en el Consejo Europeo que están pasando cosas en la región y que convendría que mirásemos a la región, hay que esperar hasta septiembre de 2012 para que la Unión Europea finalmente consiga hacer mínimamente operativa la estrategia global saheliana. 4 años en los que han ido pasando cosas. Volvemos otra vez a ese reclamo permanente de alerta temprana y acción temprana. Alerta temprana, saber lo que está pasando. ¿Alguien puede decir que no sabíamos lo que estaba pasando? Lo que ocurre es que no hay voluntad política para una acción temprana. Y luego lo que hacemos es parchear, intentar con una operación militar frenar los efectos más llamativos de un proceso que está en peligro de descontrol. Cuando los grupos terroristas avanzan hacia el sur, adelantándose a la posible operación internacional que ya está en marcha, nos encontramos con que o se actúa, y es lo que decide París, o en ese momento Malí pasa a ser claramente un santuario yihadista, sin haber resuelto ninguno de los otros problemas. En ese sentido digo que la operación es necesaria, pero es tardía, porque desde mucho tiempo antes sabíamos que pasaban cosas que tienen que ver con comercios ilícitos, como se ha señalado, y que tienen que ver con la germinación de esas revueltas por parte de tuaregs. No lo olvidemos, que acaban de llegar de Libia, vienen con armas, vienen un tanto excitados y, por lo tanto, se encuentran otra vez tentados de utilizar esas armas y esa experiencia de combate reciente en un nuevo escenario, en Malí. Por lo tanto, tardía en ese sentido. E insuficiente por lo que ya he dicho. ¿Qué tiene hoy la Unión Europea en la región? Tenemos una misión de instrucción de soldados en Níger, dirigida por un coronel de la Guardia Civil español. Tenemos una misión de instrucción de soldados malienses, con todas las dificultades que ya se han señalado, arrancando ahora mismo, con todas las dudas que nos genera el que efectivamente unos soldados que no se distinguen precisamente por su respeto de los derechos humanos, no se distinguen precisamente por su eficacia militar, técnicamente hablando, por tanto genera bastantes dudas suponer que los 500 instructores de la Unión Europea van a conseguir convertirlos en marines estadounidenses y amantes de los derechos humanos, es algo que cabe cuestionar desde ahora mismo. Y en tercer lugar, acabamos de poner en marcha también una operación similar en Libia para el control de la frontera sur de Libia, porque entendemos claramente que en una situación del desequilibrio tan enorme que hay entre las fuerzas armadas francesas y las que puedan añadirse ahora, además de las de Chad y otros países, frente a unos grupos terroristas, obviamente el débil nunca presenta batalla frontal al fuerte. Por lo tanto, lo que han hecho, como era de esperar, es difuminarse en el terreno, jugando con el tiempo a la espera de que haya tiempos mejores para volver a actuar. En ese sentido, digo, insuficiente también. E insuficiente porque ¿dónde está la activación de instrumentos no militares, políticos, económicos, comerciales y de inversión y de ayuda al desarrollo y de ayuda humanitaria? ¿Dónde están? Cuando miramos, si no recuerdo mal ahora, y me arriesgo a equivocarme con la cifra, el último llamamiento de la ONU para atención humanitaria de emergencia solo se ha cubierto en un 40%. Hoy, ya con Malí colocado en el mapa y sabiendo el problema que está habiendo en el país, en clave de hambrunas también, 40%, pues bueno, pues ya sabemos lo que eso significa, el número de vidas que se van a perder, de vidas humanas que van a morir por desnutrición crónica y por hambrunas, pero eso no activa la voluntad política. Por lo tanto, no podemos enfrentarnos a todos esos problemas pensando que con la activación de medios militares habríamos llegado a la solución de todos esos problemas. La amenaza terrorista va a seguir, ninguna duda. Y las otras amenazas y desafíos a la seguridad humana, estoy hablando en clave de seguridad humana, van a seguir también, porque no se ha activado ningún remedio de momento, ni por parte de los actores locales, que bastante tendrán ahora en dirimir sus diferencias con vistas a las elecciones previstas para este próximo mes, pero sin pensar todavía en cuáles son las necesidades y las expectativas de su propia población, ni tampoco por la comunidad internacional. Puesto que, insisto, aunque se ponga en marcha esa operación militar de instrucción de soldados, eso es una gota de un mar mucho más amplio en el que hay otras gotas que todavía no se pueden visibilizar porque no se han activado. Luego, en ese sentido, nos falta, en fin, es algo que nos dice el análisis. Cuando pensamos en construcción de paz, en resolución pacífica de conflictos, pensamos siempre en protagonismo local. No lo hay. Pensamos siempre en esfuerzo sostenido en el tiempo, largo, muchos años. No se pueden resolver los problemas que ya se han citado pensando que en 2, 3, 4 años lo vamos a arreglar. Y tiene que ser un esfuerzo multidimensional, en el cual el instrumental militar es solo una parte más, y no precisamente la más importante, para poder generar estabilidad estructural, que es algo de lo que carece tanto Malí como el resto de los países de la zona. Y atender, obviamente, las causas estructurales que provocan estos problemas, que convierten a esos países en frágiles y que sirven, por lo tanto, como caldos de cultivo para que desde ahí, a partir de ahí, se pueda generar una amenaza también de tipo terrorista o de cualquier otro. En fin, creo que la situación no es, el balance provisional que podemos hacer ahora mismo no es en ningún caso satisfactorio, sino que estamos ante un parcheo que lo único que ha hecho es ganar un poco de tiempo hasta la próxima. Y en la próxima, evidentemente, podemos estar hablando de la quinta revuelta tuareg o de la nueva manipulación por parte de grupos que volverán al territorio. Uno de los países claves en este sentido es Argelia. Si no tenemos colaboración de Argelia para poder segar la hierba bajo los pies de esos grupos yihadistas, tendremos también muchos problemas. Y la coordinación a la que apelaba Anouar es absolutamente necesario. Es decir, si no hay coordinación, como mínimo regional, difícilmente podemos pensar que haya posibilidad de avanzar en la eliminación de esa amenaza. Creo que esos siguen siendo hoy básicamente todas ellas, las que he mencionado y muchas otras, asignaturas pendientes. Lo dejo ahí y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Jesús, for this very insightful comment, in which we can understand, among other elements, that Mali anyway has coincided with the interest of the agenda of the international community, that we shouldn't forget, which is what also Anouar had mentioned, that there is a structural weakness also that prevails in Mali and that makes it hard also to find solutions, that maybe terrorism and radicalism in general existed before, but it was a consequence for the situation instead of being a trigger for it, and that at the same time maybe things won't enter into a positive trend on the short run at least. And so anyway, and not to forget also maybe the weak role of the European Union too, in fact. So that leaves it maybe among other questions to what solutions eventually we could try to draw. So anyway, the floor is yours for your comments and questions.